University. Stayed in Atlanta for a few years. Came back up this way. I do commentating for different shows. I'm very pro-black, black culture stuff. And very, of course, pro-gay. Been gay pretty much my whole life. So, I mean, that's me in a nutshell.
That's all you. That's all you right there.
Talk my shit.
I got you. What about you, Lexi?
Hi, I'm Lex. I am a Queens native. I was born in Manhattan, but I'm a New Yorker at heart. Let's see. I am 37. I'm a mother of 2, and damn, what else? You're right. That was kind of like a quick bio. I'm a marketing specialist. I also run a small business, growing apothecary business, health, wellness. I am a mental health advocate, and I'm just excited to get into some things today. We'll get further in depth when we get deeper into these questions.
So we gonna really. My name is Jermaine. I'm the host. Some people know me as Main Effect. Some people know me as Hood. I'm just enjoying the moment to get to know these beautiful people, and the stories that we're about to unwrap is gonna be amazing. So we're gonna start off with. I want to start off with Lex. I want to start with Lex because I want to know, at the same token as you being a mother too, right? And you're a lesbian woman, right?
I am a bisexual.
Bisexual. Okay, no problem. So I want to know about the coming out part of that.
Okay. The coming out part of that was actually harder than I thought. I feel like I always knew I liked girls, but I'm more of a woman. I always just looked at it like, no, I love women. I appreciate things about you. I feel like I realized it more so when I got to high school. I started my first female relationship when I was 16, and I had very encouraging parents and a very encouraging mother, but I do come from a West Indian background, so that was also, while my parents encouraged me in all these other ways, there were things that were absolutely not it. And I thought that being organic and transparent with my mother would have been great, and that was not great. It was actually really bad, and it caused a lot of drama between my mother and I. I left my house for a little bit. They rolled up on my girlfriend's parents' house, and she wasn't out yet. So there were a lot of landmines that my parents weren't aware of, that in me being honest with them, they felt like someone was making me gay. The concept or the emotional intelligence of I'm an individual and I'm making a decision on my own wasn't something that they could conceptualize, because as far as they were concerned, they raised me a certain way and I was dating guys. So how could two things coexist simultaneously? So it was very lonely in high school all the way up until college, just having to be in between both worlds of like who I knew myself to be and what was going to be acceptable or not acceptable. And I don't really shrink for anybody, so I had a lot of friction in my family for a while.
Wow, that's deep. That's very deep. And now let's switch it over. Let's talk the juice.
Mine was the opposite actually. I think, I don't know if I was ever really in, because you can't like hide all of this. This is a lot, and it's always been a lot. So I think I always been somebody who teetered in and out of my masculine and feminine energy. So I think that always gave adults and people people look at you and they sexualize kids and they say, well, I think he's gonna be gay, whatever. So I think that was always a thing, but nobody ever said it. I had turmoil within myself trying to figure out what I liked, because I knew everybody else was saying they like girls, and I had like plenty of girlfriends, but I was just like, like go away. And then as I got older, when I got into maybe like the 8th grade, I started realizing that I was attracted to guys. So then I was like, okay, well, I don't want to be gay, so I'm gonna say I'm bisexual. So that's where I was keeping it for a while. As far as coming out to my family, my mom actually told me I was gay. We had this thing where we would drive home from the bus stop, because like in Delaware, everything's far, so your bus is not like in your neighborhood, you have to drive to it. And so we're driving back and we were listening to Wendy Williams, back when she was on the radio, and she turned Wendy Williams down like in the middle of Hot Topics, and I was just like,
Ooh, not a hot
Yeah,
topic.
I don't know
She
what.
made you the
So
topic.
I'm like
right?
looking down. I'm like, oh, I'm in trouble. Like she never told. I'm like, what did I do?
I'm the hot topic.
I'm like, what? I'm just going through all the things I did in my head. She just turned to me and looked and was just like, so you're not straight. What are you? And I was like, oh. I was like, Mom, what are you? She was like, oh, don't play with me. She was like, I know my son. I just need to know what's going on. And I was like, well, I think I'm like, bye. And she was like, okay, that's it. And then she just turned it up and kept going. I was like, did I just come out? Like, that didn't feel like it was like the stories I hear. So that's kind of how it went with her. With my dad's side of the family, I waited a little longer until I was maybe in college. And I just like kind of like started sitting everybody down like randomly at these like family functions. And I was like, you guys, I'm, gay, whatever. And they were just like, you didn't think we knew that? Like, okay.
How did you react to that though?
I felt robbed.
Felt robbed?
I felt robbed. It was weird because you would think you would be relieved, but I felt weird because I felt like I had been, like the turmoil I had with myself that took me so much to like come out to them for their reaction to just be like, I was like, I could have did this a long time ago and I had to worry about the different things I was worrying about, like what kind of clothes I was wearing around them, the things I was saying, the places I was telling them I was going. These were all things that I was editing because I was I felt like I was hiding something, but the whole time they were just like, we knew. So I could have been living a lot more free as a younger person than I actually was because I had this idea in my head that I was holding this big secret that I was in the closet, but it was a glass closet apparently, and I didn't know, which was the crazy part.
So I want you to like give us an example. Like you said, you had to lie about like the parties. Like what type of parties? Like
So when I got 16, I got my license, and my mom's a hermit, so she doesn't go out. So I always had her car, and so we used to go to Philly because in Delaware there's nothing in Delaware really. So we would go to Philly because they have like a gay street in Philly, 13th Street. And we would go there because we were like good looking and like we knew people. We would get into the clubs, and so I was going to gay clubs at like 16, and I was having a ball. But I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, none of that. I didn't do any of that until I got to college. But I was just in the clubs with these older people and these gay people, and older gays were giving us like advice and all this kind of stuff. And I would come back and I would be talking on the phone, but then I would have to like edit where we were. Like I would be like, oh, you remember when we went to the pizza shop to do such and such, because I felt like my mom was listening, but I really want to say like, you remember when we went to the gay club, we was having such a good time, like that kind of stuff. I would just change it from gay club to pizza shop. My mom's like, y'all be having fun at the pizza shop. I'm like, we do be having fun at the pizza shop. Or I'm like coming back and I'm like covered in glitter because they throw glitter and stuff around. And she's like, what is that? I'm like, these girls, they just be hugging me and the glitter is just all over.
Oh, you had it figured out.
I was really good. But that's the part that I think later on is what kind of upset me. It was like, I got so good at telling stories and I didn't even have to do all this. Like,
that's crazy.
Yeah. So those are the examples of just editing clothes. Like when I would come home and like instead of like the mesh top I had on, I would have it change it to a t-shirt in the car. Things like that. Things that I didn't have to do, but I was doing because I thought I was keeping a secret. But
wow. All right. So now we go over Lex. What was like one of your top challenges?
I would say something similar. Saying I was with a guy when I was with a girl. Definitely changing the location, the club location, all of those things I feel were key components. Or I once went to Atlantic City with my girlfriend and then called my friend on three-way so that I could tell my mom that I was going to hang out with I was going to stay over my friend's house with her family. And then I was like, oh, wait, hold on a second. Let me put so-and-so on the phone so she can tell you where we are. And then my friend, we're all on three-way, by the way. I'm in Atlantic City doing what I'm doing with my girlfriend. And my friend is, God bless wherever she is. And we're on this three-way call. And then, she just tells my mom, like, oh, yeah, my family is just up here for the weekend, whatever.
That's a good friend.
Let me tell you, I had some in the clutch friends
Man, they
that
can sit
on
there.
the dime really just really freestyle for me. So there was a lot of years of hiding myself and like you said, that turmoil of toning who you are down and then needing to turn it back up. It's exhausting. It's energetically a lot. And then after a while, you're just so tired being like deceitful because you do just want to live out loud. But that was not an option.
So let me ask you something. As I listen to you say that, how you felt when you got off that phone?
Still anxious because I'm not a liar. And so I always have that weighted feeling of guilt. I don't feel like you need to lie about things, especially something like that. And at that point, I was already in college. Doing that, I was already in college.
That's the respect of a parent right there.
So it was hard.
Wow. So my question to both of y'all now, because as we hear the stories, we hear everything that y'all had to cover, right? So now, what was like the biggest negative y'all had to face that was around you that you had to constantly see? And when I say like the negative, is like the family member that really didn't accept it. Like, you know how you have that one person that can sit there and always say something slick,
Yeah.
and you have to like respond to it.
Yeah.
Like who was that? Like how was that? Like how did you handle that?
I'm Chinese Jamaican and my dad's Haitian, so
You had to go. Damn.
so
That's a mix up right
Damn.
there.
so Jamaicans have at least let me speak for my family. This is very direct and blunt, and no feelings are involved, no emotional intelligence. And while my parents were busy ambushing my girlfriend and trying to out her at her house, my aunt kept me in the house trying to have this very intrusive conversation. And one of the things she turns to me and says, she's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. You ever see two bottle tops close each other? Two girls can't do that. And I was like, okay. I was like, wait. And I had to tell her, I'm not about, because for me, you're also not my mom. So the fact that you want to cross-examine me and my sexual decisions at 16, 17, I'm dead not doing that. But even worse is while that conversation is happening, my girlfriend is like, why are your parents at my house? Like, what's the deal? And my parents, of course, they are not thinking about outing somebody else's child and the fact that she is not safe in her home. She has very homophobic parents. So it was like this really bad chain reaction. It wasn't a good look. So I would say my parents, my aunt.
So you lost that girl?
No, I was out here riding the wheels till they I was all in the toxicity.
You stood beside. You stood right beside. Wow, you stood right beside.
All the way. No, yeah, it was bad. It was bad. But it was
bad?
also my first girlfriend too. So I got with her when I was 16, 17. And then right before I went into college, it just was toxic. And then that was wrapping up. And so I was like, oh, I'm in college, let me just figure some things out. And then I tried dating guys for a second, and then I ended up pregnant. And I was like, okay.
Hold on. We gonna get back to
got it back. Interesting story.
That's toxic right there. Now you gonna have Shorty mad as hell. So now we go to Juice. We're gonna talk about who was your biggest nemesis on that.
Family-wise, I really didn't have anybody that was just like completely against it, completely like just giving me a hard time. I think sometimes it's the little jokes that people make that they think they're being funny, and they add up, especially when you're somebody you're trying to find who you are and you're uncomfortable about yourself and you're still discovering that. The little jokes are what used to get me. Like my cousins used to call me Sweets. And because they said I was sweet, because they were all like, we gonna shoot you, like they was all like thugs, but I was just like real, just like for a better word, I was just pretty, and I just didn't want to get involved in that
Hold on,
stuff.
Juice. I gotta say something. You ain't like the name Sweets,
because I knew where it derived from.
Okay, and now you go by Juice.
It wasn't like even though they weren't being cruel, I know they were saying it because I was softer than the other people
I
that I
got
was
you.
around.
Understood.
And so it's like that kind of stuff, like the little jokes that people thought were funny, but I knew where they were coming from, and it was during a time where I was very uncomfortable with myself, and I was trying to discover myself, that it felt like jabs, where they thought they might even thought they were being supportive, because they never said it like, oh, you just a sweet. They would just say, oh, sweets, come here. But every time they said it, it was like a little burn, like, stop calling me that, like stuff like that. Or like my mom was not really, she didn't really have any gay friends growing up, anything like that. So there was a lot of things that she didn't know. So sometimes she would say stuff, and I would be like, that is so problematic, and she wouldn't understand why. And I was like, she was just like, I hear her, and I'm like, you can't call people that. And she's like, well, that's what. But she's older and she's of a different generation.
And that's what you have to grant.
So for her, she's like, she doesn't know what's wrong, so she doesn't mean it out of malice. She really just doesn't know.
Right.
So it was like having to educate her. Also felt like, because I'm like trying to educate you, but I'm also still trying to figure me out too.
Right.
It felt like extra work. I think the most negative stuff though, like the real negative stuff, came from like people in the community, people I didn't know.
School.
It wasn't even my family. It was just people when I would walk by and hear people mumble like, look at this faggot. Stuff like that is what used to really get me. Like from strangers, you would think like you don't care what strangers think. But again, when you're struggling with yourself, it just makes you feel unsafe. It makes you feel unwanted. It makes you feel like on the outskirts of like your own community. And that was the part that was the hardest for me, I think.
So when you say unwanted, can you elaborate on that?
Because when everybody makes it seem like me living my life the way I want to live it in my truth is somehow offending and burdening you.
Yes.
It makes you feel like people don't want you around. Whenever you come around and you feel like, oh, you're always getting these dirty looks, so you're getting like people whispering, or you're being tolerated rather than wanted. Like everybody wants to be wanted in a space. Nobody really wants to be tolerated, because tolerated means I can hate you, but I'll let you sit here because, I mean, what can I really say?
Yeah.
It makes you feel like that when you have people that are making you uncomfortable in these spaces. And then you kind of carry that around. At least I did. I carried that around for a while. Like going into any type of space where there was a majority heterosexual crowd, I always felt like people were staring at me, or I was unsafe, or like, what are they looking at? What are they looking at? Like I was always on guard. And you can't be in the moment if you're always on guard, because you think the people in the room don't want you in the room. But I refuse to leave the room, so now we're just like here staring at each other.
If I can piggyback on that really
Yeah, you definitely can.
No, I agree that being tolerated, I think even that, I think there are people who think that their allies are being supportive, and it's like, no, energetically you're just tolerating us, and we can still feel that energy. High school was terrible. There were girls I was friends with, and then when I was out about it, I would walk down the hallways and I would hear dyke. Girls would open my gym locker, or people wouldn't want to change next to me in gym. And I had to take a moment and educate people and say, the same way that you're not attracted to every man that exists, it's the same thing. Like, just because you're a female doesn't mean I'm attracted to you. The irony in that was, then they were offended that they were my type. And I would end up with letters in my locker or in my book bag from some of these same people that were going so hard about not, being inclusive about that. So you'd be very surprised about how many people are really struggling with things within themselves and are presenting outside and making people's experiences harder than they need to be.
And it's not just women. I dealt with that with guys all the time. Like, they would just like, we would make eye contact, just walking down the hall, like, where am I supposed to look? Like, I'm just looking around, and you're looking at me, and naturally you look at the other person. And they were like, oh, what is he looking at? What is he? And I'm like, you were looking at me. How did you even know I was looking if you weren't looking at me? And I had to explain the same thing, like, bro, you're not even my type. You're nowhere near my type. Like, I wouldn't even touch you. And then they get mad, like, oh, you know he want me. Like, it's confusing. It's confusing, but it happens all the time. And then I realized in college that a lot of people were struggling within themselves. Like, guys would hit me up on the low.
Yes.
And some of the most like popular people we had around.
Yes.
And they were like slide in the DM, but this is back when we had like, we weren't really DMs, it was like Facebook. We were like, Instagram wasn't really getting there yet. So like in the Facebook and all that kind of stuff, and I used to really say like, you just made such a scene in this cafeteria.
Hello.
Because we made eye contact and stuff, but now look what's happening here. It happens all the time, and it's
all the time.
Ooh, see, y'all on
What does
point.
that look like if I do kick it with you in public? Because one of us is very comfortable and one of us is not.
So that leads us into the next part. Y'all on point. I like this. I the vibing. So now, nah, you good. Nah, y'all on point with it. Y'all on point with it. Y'all read right into it. So that's what I want to ask too. How did, like you said, you was dealing with somebody that they didn't want to be out there yet, right? How did you really navigate that when y'all alone and say like y'all out and about? Like, was it like the part where y'all couldn't be affectionate?
Oh no. We were out. Okay, so for me, I live out loud.
Mm-hmm.
She lived out loud, but away from home. So at that time, what West 4th is today is not what it was when I was in high school. So back in the early 99s, 2000, West 4th was like where you could be you and be safe and be free.
Yeah.
So I would walk my girlfriend to her class in school, and she would walk me to class in school. But for me, I had to make her be comfortable with that. Like, I'm not embarrassed by you. I get that this community and the environment, we went to school on Long Island. So you grew up with these kids. I'm from Queens. I happen to be using this address because my dad lives in Long Island.
Yeah.
But for you don't feel cool here. But when we're in Manhattan, yes, we're out with our gay friends and being that. So it's not that we didn't have an experience. It just, once we got to certain parts of town, or once we got to Long Island, or when we were near our family, then she was just
shut down.
But she was very presenting. Like, she couldn't. It was very obvious. It wasn't like, I wonder if you are. But still, she just was just not as out as I was.
Mm-hmm. And you was just about to say, as far as with school.
I mainly dealt with that in high school, because by the time I got to college, I just realized that whole like DL dating thing was not for me. Like, I live too out loud, and I want to be loved out loud.
Yes.
And I don't have time to be sneaking. I'm grown. Like, why are we sneaking around here? I am a grown person. I can't be doing that. But I did deal with it in high school, where, I mean, just like me, there were guys that were like, one guy that probably like the first guy I was ever like really in love with was going between, he was trying to figure himself out.
Okay.
And his family wasn't really very accepting. His sister was a lesbian, but we all know that for some in the black community, it's easier to accept it from a girl than it is from a guy.
True.
And that's kind of how his family was. Like, they were very accepting of her, but he got the inclination that they would not be very accepting if it was him. And we actually met at work when I was working at Target. And we would text all the time. We would play. He would come over to my house, but we never went anywhere like public. When we were at work, he would do like little stuff that I would catch, but it was very like on the slide, because he didn't want nobody to figure out what was going on. Previous to that, I had a guy in high school, because the way my high school was set up, my school was the first 2 levels. The 3rd level was like a very smart, like for all the smart kids. I was in the talent section. And I had a guy that was up there that liked me, that was DL, but he used to like leave notes in my locker, stuff like that, but we would never go anywhere together. We never went to movies together, nothing like that, because they were afraid if people saw me, and at that time I was starting to live like really in myself, that they would naturally put the 2 pieces together.
Right.
Oh wow.
And I just realized, like, I couldn't do all that sneaking around and catching late movies. Like, I'm trying to be in the bed by 12.
Right.
I'm not trying to go to the movie at 12 because you don't want nobody to see us together, or we got to sit a seat apart. Like, that just, it seems like too much. It's too much work for me. It's too much work for me at this point.
No.
Way too much work.
I pulled up the prom with my ex.
Pulled up the
I
prom.
pulled up the prom with a girl. I shook the table.
Wow.
Oh, you was really doing it big.
I
I ended up going with my best friend. I'm like, you want to go, girl? We'll go together.
Well, I'll say I went to my junior prom with my then girlfriend at the time, and then she graduated. But when it was prom time, like, I walked out with my best friend and my cousin. Like, I wasn't. But I went to her prom with her.
So
It was like, oh,
like
you
rebels.
They were like,
Rebels.
oh, you really out.
You like out.
You really dead don't care at all. Like, okay. But I think that was my way of also like letting her know that because there's also the stigma of being a bisexual woman in the community as well. That we are also not really very loved and welcomed and all the time. Because the assumption with lesbian women is you're gonna go back to a guy, or sometimes there's a derogatory term called dickin' and dykin', and it is.
I found that one out.
And that's
I ain't never knew dickin' and dykin'. Dickin' and dykin',
no?
Yes.
But that's the energy.
Dickin' and dykin'.
Yes, because if you're a bisexual, right, some people will assume that you are necessarily doing both simultaneously. Where there are some people, like when you're with the guy, you're just with the guy. When you are with a female, you're just with the female. And that's how I am. Like, I've been with a female for almost 8 years now. I have no... And I can be around attractive men, but I just am not in that space. But if I was in a space to be with a man, then that would be where my one interest is. But the bisexual thing, it's like you always have to kind of prove yourself a little bit more, because the expectation is like you here for a good time and not a long time. And so with that first relationship, because she was a veteran, and again, she's at the pier and she's whatever her, it was like I felt like she was my first experience, and I had to let her know. I was about it. Like, no, we gonna be outside. I'm not ashamed of you, and I'm not embarrassed, and I'm not scared, and I know my parents don't accept it, but I'm me, and I'm gonna do me and be me.
But I think that's because people conflate the experience that we have when we start going into, like, whether you're gay, bisexual, whatever, when you're trying to identify
labels,
yourself,
right.
And you're kind of confused, and you could be teeter and totter, and kind of like the guy I was dating when I was like way back when, the one that was going between girls and guys. They confuse that with bisexuality, and it's not the same thing.
Right.
That is a state of exploration and experimentation.
Yeah.
And this is when you actually identify,
right.
I like both,
right.
I'm interested in both, and I'm willing to date both.
Oh.
There's a difference
Yep.
there, but they conflate the two, like, because you do both, you have to be confused.
Right.
But there's just two different stages.
Exactly. And that's when you get people being like, oh, I don't like the labels. Because talking to people who don't necessarily have the emotional intelligence, or you're not a part of the community, trying to make you understand something that you don't, and you don't really want to, because you're not going to live in the community.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't do labels. I've seen so many people just be like, I don't do labels. Because to try to get into the they, them, he, her, lesbian, or whatever it is, or non-binary, it's a deep conversation. So I think we're in a space today where people are just like, I don't do labels. This is who I am.
Yeah, y'all done touched down on a lot. Y'all done went in on me. But my thing is, this is how I look at it, as you face a lot of challenges in the dating world, correct?
Correct.
And what's the top challenge?
Niggas ain't shit.
So that's
Just like that. Just like that.
How I
Alright, so-
But it's the same thing. Like, I think people think there's like this difference between the gay dating world and the straight dating, and it's not. We deal with the same exact stuff. The same thing that a lot of women have to deal with men. I have to deal with it times two, because now it's two men in the situation. It's the same thing I feel like with women. I'm not a woman, but I speak. It's the same thing. With, like, we have the same problems, but sometimes they're more enhanced because there's two of us. So like you get extra testosterone. They both have testosterone. So you got two people that are like,
and don't let it be a polyamorous situation.
Yeah.
Hold on. So even in the they do poly. Well, yeah. I mean, I know I didn't. They do I didn't know that.
Yes.
We do everything y'all do.
So if you're in a poly situation, believe it or not, that requires so much more work than a regular relationship, because poly relationships require a lot of consent and checking in. And do you want to know before? Do you want to know after? Do we meet the person? Do you only sleep with the person? Do you go on dates with the person? So depending upon how you customize that situation,
I would think that's any poly relationship.
No.
Heterosexual poly relationship.
Right.
Or same sex. You still gotta give consent.
But I'm gonna be honest. It's the first time I heard about that.
There's
We do all the things. That's why I say people. I mean, people
Yes.
really sat down and really had a conversation with somebody in the community. You realize that there's really not a lot of differences. The only difference is who we choose to lay down with. But We have polys, you have open, you have people that have 4 and 5 husbands and
Yep.
4 and 5 wives. Like we do all the same
Or
stuff.
people are partners.
It's just covered
People
in
have
rainbow.
partners. People have wives.
I didn't know this. This is different. It's new to me.
Yeah, so we deal. That's why I said we deal with the same shit. So the top level is nigga and shit. that's what happens with me. Everybody you have people that don't have emotional intelligence.
Oh, baby.
You have this idea of, I call it the bigger and better. There's always bigger and better around, so nobody actually wants to invest in a relationship with someone because
Yeah.
they're always looking for the next best thing. You have people who have internal trauma, who have not dealt with that trauma, so the way that they outburst is by cheating and by beating on people and sleeping with other people. Like you have all the same things that you deal with in a regular situation, we deal with them too.
Yeah.
And that's why it's hard to date, because there's a lot of people out here that just not worthy of dating, whether it be straight or gay. They're just not at the place where they should be dating. They're not healed.
Right. I think the one caveat with our community in that sense is that we just carry hate though. So on top of all those other things, like no, then there are people you can be with a person that is struggling with themselves, hate themselves, and then that be so much toxicity within your relationship because they're not settled about some of those things. So yeah, there's
And you deal with the hate from the world
and
too.
right. So you're dealing with the hate from the world, and there are people who can only sometimes look at that interaction as a sexual interaction, and once they've climaxed, then it's like, oh, I'm not really gay. It ain't even really like that. You're like, okay, you know what? you had an outer body experience. Okay, no problem.
Not you saying you took the soul though. You said she threw that in there to the out of body experience.
Listen,
Not
man.
you taking the soul. That's crazy. That goes into our next one, right? As we sit there, we talk about that. Now let's really sit there and look at the part of we gonna go back to where you said your relationship was toxic before you got in college, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how did she look at when you had kids?
Oh, that did not go great either.
And then,
It was toxic because we were all so young. Remember, I was in
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And then I got pregnant my sophomore year in St. John's. So she and I were like not really together anymore, just kind of still kicking it, but it wasn't a thing. I was now dating other people, and the person that became the father of my kids was like one of my friends, was like a homie, and he knew I was dating her, but that relationship had its expiration date, and I think that you stay in situations, especially when you're young, because it's convenient. It's what you know, it's familiar, and that was my first female partner. And then because we weren't dealing with each other when I became pregnant, for her, that really threw her for a loop, because I think she felt that she would always have maybe a certain level of access to me in a way, and that wasn't it, because like I said, when I'm with a female, that's where I'm at. When I'm with a male, that's where I'm at. And, so I got pregnant, and I made the decision that I made, and she was hysterical. And that was unfortunate, but
She was
you know.
missing that outer body experience you were talking about.
No, you know what it is?
That's why she was
No,
hysterical.
she actually put me through a lot of different things because I wasn't as experienced in the life. So there were things that she was doing and moving and shaking, and so I got tired of the toxicity of that situation. And at that point, I'm like, well, girl, I done got my stripes already. I'm about to be out here, and at that point, she was like, oh, so you're dating girls, you're dating guys, and that's where it just kind of, we started to distance. And so by the time she found out I was pregnant, I think for her, because she always told herself, like, you always gonna go back to guys, and that was like a verbally abusive relationship in that space where the aggression of her not being able to be openly out, and me knowing my parents don't approve of it, and I'm still being out, I think was hard for her. But then when I just had a baby and was like, I'm doing what I want, I think for her it was like, wow, so you just literally dated a couple of girls, you had a whole baby shower and invited your new girlfriend to your baby shower, but you want nothing. I dated other girls. I'm saying I dated other girls after her. I dated other girls after her. You know, the first person you ever date, no matter, they always, even if you have kids with the person, they always think that they don't have access to you.
No,
And I'm saying that was the energy for her. was even though she was my first girlfriend, I had dated other girls, and I think she was just very dismissive of that. And then I had dated guys. So by the time I was pregnant, she and I were not communicating as much.
okay.
So when she found out I was pregnant, it was like, wait, when did you go back like to a guy? Because I just knew you were dating another girl. But she was like, she ain't me. It ain't gonna be all of that. I'm like, okay. And so that's more so what I mean is just that feeling like they're always going to be that person, and when you move on and you grow and you expand, you got to deal with those things.
What you thinking about?
I was like, that was good. I was like, you explained that very well. You explained that very well.
Oh, that's good. This is good, man. This is definitely good. Well, that's really where we at with it, man. I appreciate y'all for coming out and coming through.
Of course.
Please say your handle so people can know where to find you at.
Mine is Juice No Chaser, but it's spelled JUIC3 underscore
Is that no chase?
NOCHAS 3R. So Juice No Chaser. Because you don't need a chaser.
Look. See, out of body experience.
Whoa.
Now we got Lex.